Welcome
Got it.
everyone. Today
Yeah.
we have the lovely Tracie Oldham with us today. I'm really excited to hear from Tracie. She's recently released a book. So she's going to tell us about that. And she's got an amazing story of advocating for survivors, for children, and for mental health issues, which is so related. So welcome, Tracie.
Hello, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
You are so welcome. So let's start with your story. It's just incredible what I've heard so far. So tell us some more.
My story is probably anyone that's been in my position story. I was ill-conceived. I always use that word. Oh, I was a product of a very, very miserable marriage. Unfortunately, I was my mother's hatred for my father was carried on to me. So every time she looked at me, it just reminded her of him. So she wanted nothing to do with me from the word go. She even tried to have several abortions. Um, so she kept handing me to different families from, I think, 2 weeks old, and she just did not want me back. But unfortunately, the families kept giving me back. Eventually, I didn't know at the time, but I was put in voluntary placement, which is where any parent at that stage could hand their child over to anybody. You didn't need paperwork. You could be standing in the middle of a shop and you could just say to a stranger, would you take care of my child? And that's all it took. There was no follow-up. And I got lost in the system. And because I was lost in the system, I kept getting shunted to different families, virtually the same families, but just back and forwards. But they were very, very dysfunctional families.
Were they families that knew your birth mother? So were they like linked to you in that way, or how did they
were
come into your world, I guess?
They were on my father's side, but it was like I was dumped on them and they resented it.
Right.
But so it was that family honor thing. We are not going to put you in a home because we're not going to have it said that we didn't take care of you, but we'll take care of you, but we'll make sure you know it. And life was horrible. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. There's no other word for it. Gradually, with each family, the paperwork slowed down, and until like tens of thousands of people, I got lost in the system.
That's just
so.
And this is through voluntary placement.
Yes.
So how many children do you think went missing?
They said when the Forgotten Australians done a report, I think it was 2003, they said they estimated, and that's only an estimation, there was 100,000 children, but 49,000 aren't accounted for, but they do believe there was a lot more.
49,000.
So all these people, similar to me, just got put in care with anybody. They could have been killed. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
They could have died. Anything could have happened to them. They just literally just vaporized. Yeah. They literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. And that is quite scary to think that the Victorian government allowed an entire generation just to dissolve. I call us the invisible generation. We really are invisible and we qualify for nothing. Absolutely nothing. We've got no rights.
Because you were saying you've been missed by the whole redress scheme. You've been missed by apologies to survivors because there's no public acknowledgement.
Well, we're not acknowledged as Forgotten Australians because we weren't institutionalised and we weren't wards of the state. So if you weren't ward of a state, you don't fit in anywhere. We have no paperwork, which means that makes it even harder. So solicitors won't look at us. We don't qualify for national redress. So if you're raped by a priest, the national redress will absolutely cover you. But if you're raped by your family, well, too bad, too sad.
Yeah.
And that's not our
these were
responsibility.
kind of like foster families, I guess we could say, that you were put with. So they're still
Well, they were, yeah.
Yeah.
They were foster family. You were fostered out. It was, and that's where I've found, since then, I've found so many contradictions. I mean, because it is called informal foster care. So exactly, thank you. I'll read this to you, and I think this is the contradiction that when I've written to all the politicians, they've come back, those that have actually heard of it, and it says, what is the definition of a care leaver? According to the Victorian State Government, a care leaver is a person who spent time in care as a child under the age of 18. The care could have been foster care, residential care, mainly children's home, or any other arrangement outside of their immediate or extended family. So if we don't qualify, what does?
Absolutely.
We were in permanent out of care home care. So how do we not qualify as care leavers? We don't even have that title. We are not even allowed to be called care leavers. I applied to Open Place. I was rejected. Open Place is a place designed solely for institutionalised or children that were fostered. I got a letter back saying I didn't fit the bill.
Yeah.
No.
So it's just where are you being acknowledged?
We're not. And each time I've contacted a politician, they've been very, very supportive, and those that have actually answered, majority don't even answer.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know I'm going to shock you there to say that the politicians are rude. The ones that have answered have been wonderful. Michael O'Brien and Edward O'Donoghue, that are both just real, what a shame. They've actually been very supportive, which is lovely. Matthew Back, he's been supportive. But when it comes to actually doing something, nobody will actually cross that line. All I've asked for is someone to stand up in Parliament and acknowledge voluntary placed children or survivors, and give us the same rights afforded to the care leavers, because we were care leavers. It is tragic to think that so many adults now, my age, don't even know that they were voluntary placed. I'm fighting a losing battle because nobody has got the tenacity to stand up in Parliament and do anything. Every few years there's been a national apology to everybody except us. We don't deserve anything. I mean, it's quite soul destroying, because you really are invisible. You just don't fit in anywhere. When I got the letter back from Freedom of Information to say that I didn't exist, I felt my heart just sink. Yeah. At least when I thought I was a ward of a state, I at least thought I belonged somewhere. As stupid as that sounds, at least when I got the pack, because they sent me a package, this place, and said that welcome to Open Place. You're now, part of this family, blah, blah, blah. So at least I thought, well, at least I'm a forgotten Australian. At least I'll have some title. Then all of a sudden they wrote back, and because months went by, I think a year actually, and I wrote back and they said, no, you don't qualify. So I thought, let's see.
These are all titles, but it's so important that you're recognized so you guys can be compensated, you can be supported. Like, there must be so much healing. The survivors should be given those opportunities. It's just awful to hear that the government is just blindsiding it.
And it's such a simple fix, because each person that has read my submission has turned around and said, you're right. There's too many contradictions. You've made valid points that we can't actually say aren't right. They are dead spot on. There are flaws, and each one goes back to the government authorities. It's not like they're simple little things either. Even just the title, what is a care leaver? Straight away they came back and said, we can't argue with that. You are a care leaver.
Absolutely, you're in care.
So why can't somebody just stand up and say that? Why is it so hard?
Absolutely.
So because you're not a care leaver, you miss out on so many things. When they had the national apology, I mean, I think that was the greatest kick in the guts anyone could give another human being, because the Royal Commission did mention incest victims, but the majority of it was all
I was just
institution.
thinking that when you were talking before, it absolutely mentioned incest victims.
Yeah.
So
It's like as far as I'm concerned, like my argument's always been like, yes, I wasn't put in an institution, but a family is an institution. And
absolutely.
I know, and I was put in care by the government. They knew that I was there. So we should have been acknowledged in the Royal Commission a lot more. We never even got a mention. The voluntary placement should have been in the Royal Commission, but we were completely ignored. Incest, I think they probably touched on that for about 5 minutes, but the majority of it was institutionalised, and that's all that people want to hear. It's like it's a special exclusive club that we're not a member of.
Yeah.
And yes, I do feel a bit passionate about it, because it's very, very frustrating. It's like, as I said, I approached 2 of the highest ranking lawyers in Victoria. Both said I had a powerful case. Then when they found out it was incest and I had no paperwork, it was dropped. Don't want to know about it, because I had no money.
Yeah.
End of story.
And because
And
you were saying because the abusers didn't have money, they were unwilling to proceed with the case. And it's where is there justice in that?
well, there is no justice. It's all about money. It's about being able to sue somebody, and they've got the government authorities. They go after all these institutions, and they know it's instant money. As soon as you sign them up, they've got instant money. Unfortunately, we will never see justice unless our perpetrator is wealthy. And in my case, no, they're not. So, and they also wouldn't take it on because I had no papers from my childhood. So again, the invisibles.
Yeah,
And I'm saying
it's
I actually wanted to sue I wanted to sue the Victoria government. That was going to be my case for dereliction of duty.
That's it, for
And
irresponsibility, isn't it?
yes, they are responsible for following up on a child's welfare, and they did not follow through. And that is dereliction of duty.
And they were aware that you had been, we'll say, fostered or voluntary placed elsewhere. Is that correct? And then
that is, I've got it I've got the court documents.
Yeah, isn't that?
So that's where it's at. Yeah. But unfortunately, as I said at the start, my story is no different to tens of thousands of other people. And I think that's why I will never see justice. And I've finally accepted that now, but I'll keep going. There's got to be one person out there that's got a conscience. Good luck trying to find one, but I will keep trying.
And I guess in some ways, we've looked to our courts and somewhat to our governments for a long time for justice. And I think there's a whole movement of people now realizing that it's actually more about awareness, and it's about these topics being spoken about and communicated. So the justice might be somewhat different. It should definitely be that the courts are ruling in your favor, but the fact that people know your story is also justice in some way as well, that you can speak out.
It will be my legacy to at least to say, well, I couldn't have my time in court, so I'm going to put it in a book, and that will be my final words. They can't be retracted. I stand by everything I've written. There is not one word in that book that's not true, that cannot be proven. And that's the difference. It may not be eloquently written. It may not be a Pulitzer Prize winner, but it's a very raw and honest account of my experiences. And sadly, they probably echo so many other people, because I didn't just, there's people that were voluntary placed that probably were put in nice homes, but the majority were inconvenience. And every day of your life, my life was just shocking. There's nothing else I could say other than shocking, and someone should be held accountable.
Absolutely. Especially
the teachers
proof that the government was aware that you were moved. So,
but it's not only that, it's just the government's lack of, it's different now, thank God. But I did tell people about my abuse. I told teachers, I told family, I even told the police when I was 13 years old, and I was sent back to live with my abusers.
Same place. So many enablers.
It was like it didn't matter what I told them, and I was very graphic. I went through the whole thing and nothing. So it's about just giving some people a little bit of reassurance of, oh, thank God somebody else went through it.
Absolutely.
Now I don't feel like it was just me, because nobody, especially incest, it's so taboo. Nobody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everyone wants to talk about a priest or institution. That seems to be quite acceptable. But when it comes to talking about family and incest, it's like, okay, well, moving on, because it's so common. That's why.
Yeah, it's that little dark family secret, isn't it, that's hidden
It
away.
is.
So yeah.
So, and then when it comes to, as you get older, obviously you're trying to deal with the aftermath of being sexually abused as a child, being tortured, being palmed from one family to another, and constantly being told that you're not wanted. There wasn't a day that goes by that I was not told, because my name wasn't Tracie. I was called Germ.
Germ.
Yeah, because as far as I was concerned, I was a disease. So I don't know if you've heard of the book Flowers in the Attic.
Yes.
Like, well,
Read that
that
when I was young.
I brought that when it first came out, and I was absolutely astounded at the similarities in between that book and me. But mine was actually worse. And I thought, my God, I remember I was about 17, 18 when it came out. I thought, oh my God, I could write a book like this. But I think, and the grandmother, I mean, my auntie made that grandmother look like an amateur.
Mm.
I
It's evil
um
people, isn't it?
It is. And the psychological, people don't realize the psychological effect it has on a child, because you get conditioned, you grow up expecting to be treated like that by everyone, and you accept it.
Your boundaries are so beaten down.
Yeah.
That
So
reflects as
there's, um, and the mental health system let me down so just as bad. I mean, it was just shocking. It was just that whole stigma. There's no compassion. There's no empathy. You've got archaic old doctors, or even doctors that are so dogmaed and they're stuck in their ways that you're pigeonholed, and nobody stops to think, well, what made you like that? Or what made you, act? But it's like I got labelled with misinformation, and that was it. That was my story of my life. Once you get that label, you cannot shake it.
What was the label? Misinformation?
Well, the first time, because I was very suicidal,
Yes.
I think the first time I tried to suicide was 16, and none of them worked for attention. That's the most ridiculous thing. You know how people say you're doing it for attention? Well,
Yeah.
no.
You're just done.
Um, that at 22, I had my most, well, at that time, my most severe. They thought I had actually died. So instead of putting me in psychiatric care, I was told to go into a rehab. And I went into a rehab because I was addicted to Valium and
Okay.
Mother's Little Helpers and alcohol. But that wasn't my problem. My problem was I
What's
just
underneath
hadn't.
that?
Yeah, I was covering with that.
Absolutely.
So instead of addressing the issue, they put me in a rehab full of heroin addicts.
Oh, which is just going to compound.
And I was thinking, okay, well, I can't actually be. And I think there was probably 5 people in there for alcohol and a couple more for substance, but the whole place was just full of heroin addicts at that time. And
so
it
much.
was a total useless. And the therapist that I had, she needed therapy. You walked in the room and everywhere you looked on the walls, there was photos of her dog.
Wow.
And I sat down and all I could, like, you just look with these eyes. And I said, I take it you this is your fur baby. So every session, all she talked about was her dog. And I didn't wear a dress. I used to wear jeans all the time. And she said, I think one of your biggest problems is you just don't suit society. You need to dress more feminine. I said, but what's that got to do with why I'm here? She goes, because you're rebelling. Okay. And because I'm wearing jeans, that's making me addicted to tablet. Yes. Okay. She was
Unbelievable. Just when you needed help as well. And this is the systems that we have.
that was total. But the second time, the last time, sorry, it was the most severe. I mean, I've attempted suicide so many times, but that was 2009 or 10, I can't remember.
And there's a huge between people, survivors of childhood sexual abuse and torture and, you know, all of this psychological abuse. There's a huge correlation with addiction, with suicidal tendencies. And, you know, there's just this massive need for real services and mental health services that actually support survivors, hear them. So it's so frustrating to hear your story of when you desperately needed help and look at the systems that were there for you.
Well, I could excuse it to say, well, that was then, but it's still happening.
It's
it is. There is so many things wrong in the mental health system. The Grand Canyon pales against the cracks. It really does. I cannot tell you. 2 examples was when I was admitted. First of all, I had a severe I didn't realise they called it a severe suicide attempt, which means I succeeded, and I think I died 4 times in my son's arms. Anyway, they left me in a room on my own, but they left all the tablets on the bench.
As you do.
So when I revived, I saw them there and I took them again and I OD'd in the hospital. I mean, that is the attention that I was getting.
Yeah.
So they ended up putting me in the psych unit, and I don't recall anyone speaking to me. There was no eye contact. I was left on my own to do with my own devices. People kept walking in and out of my bedroom, trying to steal my things. I went and told the nurse, people are walking in and out of my bedroom. Can I close the door? No. Just calm down. You lined up and there was a window. It was like out of the cuckoo's nest. You just got handed a whole heap of tablets and you were kept in a stupor.
It's not true.
By the time I finally got to see the psychiatrist, he had already been filled in on my past by my ex-husband, who at that time I didn't know was going to leave me, and he lied through his teeth. And everything he said was wrong, and the things that were right were in the wrong years. So based on his misinformation, this psychiatrist didn't even need to talk to me. And I said, well, why am I here? He says, oh, we've already got your information. You're borderline personality. You've got CPTSD. And the list went on, and I went, based on what?
Yeah.
I said, are you going to ask me if I've got anything to offer? I said, I'm the patient. And then I got told that I was hostile because I dared to question him.
Yeah.
I said, well, for a start, you should be asking the client to produce a history of their medical records. I said, you didn't do that. I said, had you asked me, I could have given you the records quite willingly. I said, and you could have treated me accordingly. Instead, they based their judgment on somebody else that didn't even know my past. I only knew the tidbits that I had told him. So I was given a handful more tablets. Oh, I tried to suicide while I was in the hospital as well. The nurse came in and just said, just stop being so stupid and get back in bed.
Whoa.
Didn't ask would I like to see a psychiatrist to discuss why I done it. And it was just a horrible, horrible experience. I came out of there worse than I went in. I was discharged because they needed my bed, even though I was still very suicidal.
Unbelievable.
I was then told to do outpatients Well, lived in the country and I didn't have a car and I had to rely on my ex to drive me in there. He kept letting me down. I'd ring him up, say I can't make it to the appointments. They ended up kicking me off the program because he'd already rang up and told them that I refused to go.
Yeah.
It's like once you hit that system, you lose your intelligence, you lose your integrity. Nobody listens to you. It's like, well, you're a basket case, so you've got no rights to have any opinion. So they talk about you, not to you. Yeah.
You're
They
labeled.
never talk directly to you.
It's all about these medications too. Like, where's the healing in that? Like you said, they never asked you what was underlying all these issues that you were feeling at that time. You know, it's just all about take this tablet, cover it up. It's so disappointing to hear.
They're not, I mean, they were heavy duty. They were so strong that when I was walking down the corridor, I had to literally hold on to the wall and drag myself. I couldn't even walk. So I don't know what therapeutic benefit being in that place done. It done nothing to me.
Yeah. If anything, like you said, it made matters worse.
They just put a Band-Aid on a wound, but they don't actually heal the wound.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's why I have advocated so many times for so many people, because there's so many flaws, there's so many problems, and nobody wants to address them. It's not that they can't, they won't.
Yeah.
We seem to have money for what we want. They keep saying, oh, look, there's too much money involved in them, you know, to invest in the mental health. Well, maybe if they actually retrained the staff, because most of them are desensitized, they should rotate them into different areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once you've got my background, well, that's it, you're doomed. Absolutely doomed.
And so I know you've done so much and obviously done so much healing. How did you, you know, from such a childhood of so much trauma and so much emotional, sexual, physical abuse, how did you rise above all that and heal?
You never heal. And anyone that tells you they do aren't being honest. You learn to accept. You learn to just live day to day. You think you're healed. I mean, I often think I'm healed, and then all of a sudden I'll just be watching a movie and I'll be triggered, and all of a sudden you realise you're not healed, because if you were healed, they say if you can tell a story without crying, you're there. And
yes, that emotional charge is no longer there as severely.
I think when I applied to go for historical charges with Socket, and that failed as well, that undone a lot of healing. That really did. That was only last year, and I've had to come.
Yeah, that's the thing too, like these court cases, and when you're getting turned down and you don't fit in this category, we can't help you. This is such a traumatizing experience for survivors. It brings everything else up. You're not heard, you can't take action, you know, and you've reached this point of healing where finally you're taking action and you're speaking out, and these awful systems, these archaic, you know, things that are just need to be broken down are actually re-traumatizing people.
Well, the thing is, like in the historical charges, especially, they when the Cardinal Pell court case, everyone was inundating the police. Well, suddenly they've decided, well, I want justice. And rightly so. So they should.
Absolutely.
So the government's encouraging people, come forward, step up, you know, put in go to Socket.
And what does Socket stand for again, for people that
the historical sexual abuse? So of course you before you go there, you've got to get to a point to actually go there, and this is what people don't realise. It takes a lot. It took me a lifetime to even accept it, to even talk about it, to even say, well, bugger it. And it took Facebook, a message on Facebook to set me to say, well, that's it, bugger this. When the Cardinal Pell case was on, one of my family members was, oh, string the bastard up, you know, he's nothing but a filthy big blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow.
Was that someone that was involved in your trauma.
Knew all about it, yes. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. So I looked on the comments, and everyone that knew what had happened to me and done nothing
Yeah.
were all stringing him up. You know, the vigilantes were out, yet they stood silent. And I thought, that's it. So I wrote them all a letter and said, well, I'm going to go to socket. That's it. I'm going to actually put in historical charges.
Wow.
All these people said to me, should I ever get brave enough to go, they will come as witnesses.
Wow. Well, that's good.
Don't get too excited. I do genealogy, and I've since found out that we have got one thing in common on the branches of the family. We all suffer with amnesia.
Right.
Suddenly, yeah, the amnesia set in along the family. It was like just a chain reaction, like the plague. So
Yeah.
instead of COVID, we just had amnesia.
Yeah.
Suddenly, everyone's memories failed them when they were called. But the thing is, first of all, you've got to work up the courage to go to socket.
Absolutely.
You've then got to accept the fact that if you do, you will ostracize yourself forever from your family members. And that's another. So once you do go through with it, you then sit there and they pick at the wound until it bleeds. And you finally have to acknowledge things that you've kept repressed your whole life, and you publicly say it. Right. So now you've ostracized your family. You've just told the police things you didn't even realize that you knew.
Yeah.
Only for 18 months later, them to turn around and go, oh, this is in the too hard basket. We're not going to deal with it anymore. Sorry. After they've just told you you've got a powerful case, we're going to get him.
So you went that far through, like it was 18 months of, whoa, yep. I didn't realize that. I thought they kind of told you up front. That's just horrific.
Yep. So with all these witnesses, statements, evidence coming out of their ears,
yeah,
it was just inexplicably dropped. Bang.
That's really, yeah.
And you know why? Because he claimed dementia. That was it. I said, did you have him independently assessed? No.
He just claimed it partway through the case.
So then you've got to live with the fact that you've just been ostracized by your family. You've now wasted 18 months of triggers, of backflash. It's just the psychological.
That journey for you, bringing it all up. Yeah.
And then just to go, bang, it's done.
Not doing it anymore. Oh,
yep.
Horrific.
Now live with that. Now you'll have to re-heal the wounds that we just picked apart. It all comes undone. Everything you've spent your life trying to heal from comes undone at that moment. It's like the last insult, like you've had injustice your whole life, but then
this was a chance that you thought you might get just justice.
I can't even put into words. It's like someone just pushes you over a cliff. You just feel yourself collapse. And then it's like, what do you do with all this information now? What am I supposed to do with it? I mean, I didn't even know about it in the first place. And it wasn't until they kept questioning and suddenly they unlock Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Well, you can't put all that back.
Yeah,
and now you're stuck with all this horrible memories that you spent so long pushing into the abyss of your mind. Now what do I do with it? So then you've got to go through it all again. And then I thought, stuff it. No. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way than this. So, and that's why I said to you at the start, the only justice I've ever known is injustice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the injustice system in Australia.
It is. That's what it is. It's just definitely for the haves and have-nots. People like me, we will never get justice.
Yeah.
And that is why I do advocate so much, because I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like to have no support. I know what it's like to be disbelieved. And it is soul destroying. It's horrible. So, especially when you're like dealing with narcissism, like you don't even know it's happening. You don't realise it because you've been abused for so long. Now women are finally, and men, because I'm sick to death, domestic violence is both. It's not just women, it is men as well. And I get a lot of people argue the point with me because they don't want me to say that. But as far as I'm concerned, there is no gender. There really isn't. So I advocate for both men and women when it comes to domestic violence.
That's awesome.
And people seem to be under the assumption that you need to physically punch into someone to be a victim of domestic violence. But I think verbal abuse and the psychological warfare is far worse. Like when I was a child, the physical abuse, well, the bruises go away, but it's that systematic attack on your mind that lasts with you for a lifetime. And it also molds you, it conditions you to how you grow up and what you accept.
Yes.
Now, and people don't realise that had somebody intercepted a lot earlier, people have often said, how do you think you would have been had you not had that life? Well, that's a stupid question because I don't know. I should, the one thing I should hate people, but I don't. I'm the opposite. Yeah. Instead, I always believe there's a reason for things. I really do. Some people are just bad. There are no excuses. Some people are born rotten. But other people have had so much shit in their life that, I've had the most tragic cases where the gag order, for example, these people, their daughters were murdered and nobody acknowledged them because their daughters were prostitutes and nobody cared. And, you think, where does the justice? There is no justice for the broken. I know you shouldn't call people broken, but
for the victims, though, for those that are hurt, the justice system is only protecting the other side, the perpetrators.
There is
possible, labeling.
I mean, you look at the Brittany Higgins incident, and what happened to her was disgusting. I'm not saying it wasn't. Please don't misunderstand. But you've got Grace Tame. You've got all these people saying what we've been saying for 30, for 40, for 100 years. They're not saying anything we never said. But for some reason, because she was a government worker.
Yeah.
Nothing happened to her that hasn't happened to hundreds of thousands of people who don't even get acknowledged.
Yeah.
The amount of newspapers and journalists that I have wrote to, they ignore me.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yes, it's amazing. They are the double standards.
Yeah.
We advocate for child abuse. We advocate for survivors, only if you fit the limelight.
Yeah, when it's a big case,
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I actually have gone through my old posts for over the years, and it's funny because I listened to Grace Tame and I thought, well, what she actually said that all the other advocates for sexual abuse haven't said for millennium. I mean, yet for some reason, everyone listens to her. And she's only regurgitating, obviously, what, other people have said. The Brittany Higgins. I mean, I've lost count the amount of people, rape victims I've known. And especially don't even get
from workplaces as well. It's just unfortunately so common.
Yeah. And I think that's what frustrates people like me. It's become like an Olympics. I call it Survivor Olympics. It's like everyone's trying to outdo each other. I'm a bigger survivor than you. And it really is. It's hard. It's hard to advocate these days because you've got so many different areas that are specialised now. You've got the journalists that only want to hit, certain cases. You've got the institutional abuse that people only want to hear about. And it's like, where do you even fit in the scheme of me? We don't fit in anywhere.
Yeah. And it is, like you were saying about the journalism, it is such a shame that they're not covering, they could actually really be promoting a lot of change and awareness in the communities, but there's nothing. Like, important things aren't covered that advocates are doing, important things aren't covered that they're sent. So yeah, it's a real shame.
Even the actual advocates that are very in the limelight at the moment, they don't even acknowledge other advocates. And that is frustrating because they're ignoring the people that
Yeah,
they're supposed to be supporting.
yeah, and it's the people at the end of the day that it's all about, isn't it? So
It should be. That's what it should be all about. It's not about a personality thing.
you go,
It's not about a, but
yeah,
unfortunately, because they're in the limelight, I think,
there's a responsibility with that as well. So
they're relying on you,
mm,
to
be
be
that
the
voice for
voice.
people. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So tell us about your book and how we can order it as well, because I'm sure some of our supporters would love to do that before we finish off. I come across Tracie when I heard about her book release, and I was just like, that is the most authentic title I've ever seen, My Shitty Life. So tell us about your book.
It just talks about my life, literally, and the true account of my life chronologically. I didn't know how to start. I've been writing it for years,
Yeah,
but it triggered me too much.
did you start after the court case? Like, was that a
No,
feeling? No.
I have been writing this book for years on and off, but it was so triggering. It
Yeah.
was, and then I didn't know how honest to be in it.
Yeah. You obviously
Um,
wanted to be quite honest in the end.
yeah, well, at the end of the day, you either tell a story and tell it for what it is, or it's not worth wasting people's time. So
That's awesome.
because I'm housebound because I'm disabled, and of COVID lockdown, I actually thought, bugger it, I might as well utilise the time
Oh,
instead
wow.
of sitting there feeling sorry for myself. And I just decided, well, that's it. Now, how do I approach this? And I read another author that said that how much information should you say on a memoir? Do
Mm.
you, because there's a bit of a, when you're talking about sex abuse, you've got to also bear in mind, like, if the first page, I've got a big trigger warning, which I noticed a lot of people don't put on their books.
Mm.
Um,
That's
so
interesting. That's an interesting comment. So, yeah.
I've read a lot of them, and I thought, no, so I thought that was the first thing I made sure I done. I put a big trigger saying that it mentions sexual abuse, also mentions all topics, blah, blah, blah. So be very mindful when you read this book.
That's cool.
And I started to write it, and it was just writing. I have a tendency when I would like when I done my statement for socket, I tend to talk in the third person. It's a protective thing, I've been told.
Right. To kind of distance it a little bit from,
Yes.
yeah.
So when I was writing, it was like I was writing about someone else because it was just type, 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 type. And that the first part of it, and I didn't actually absorb what I was writing until I was trying to proofread. And then all of a sudden I thought, shit, did that actually all happen to me? Wow, they couldn't have. And then as I started to write about my parents, because I couldn't help but laugh. See, I've got a wicked sense of humour, and as bad as they were, I compare them to Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor in Taming of the Shrews. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, years ago.
Yes, well, that's what my mother and father were like. My mother was 5 foot of fury, and my father was in the Merchant Navy. So you had two mismatched people. But he was gay, and he married for a cover. So
Wow.
the fight, but
Oh,
they were both musicians. So while I'm writing their story, I'm cracking up laughing because it really was shocking, but it was so shocking it was funny
yeah.
because they would have the biggest doozy fights anyone could have. And she tied him to a tram track and left him there. So the more I'm writing it, and then I thought, I'm actually just going to write this as life happened. I'm not going to.
Good on
And
you.
whether people think, yeah, obviously now it would have been domestic violence, but in those days, they gave us, I mean, my mother gave as good as she got, apparently. She
Mm.
was just as bad. So, and then I sort of just went on to the next part and the next part and the next part. And I thought, I can see a pattern here. So I just continued it.
Wow.
And I just continued the honesty. And it wasn't until the end of the book, I actually had a revelation. I had never looked at myself. I'd never actually thought about my life because it was just my life.
Yeah.
And
to see it all, like you said, from one
Fitting.
stage to another. Yeah.
I never realised just the horror, but it was like at one stage, like you talk about being cursed, and I actually did think I was cursed because it was just a series of events, unfortunate events, just one after another. And you keep thinking, how unlucky can one
Yeah.
human being be? So I just kept the flow going. And I thought, well, I'll just keep talking about the unfortunate things that I've been through. And I thought, my God, this will end up being an encyclopedia by the time I'm finished. But it was, and it was
Do you
like,
find as you wrote, different like things that you hadn't thought of for ages were coming up as well, like older memories?
I hadn't even remembered them. It triggered me
Wow.
to remember.
Mm.
I'd obviously suppressed so many of my memories for so long that while I was writing, like somebody would say something and then I said something to my cousin and she goes, "Oh, I remember that, blah, blah, blah." And all of a sudden it just comes flooding back.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my God, do I put that in the book or don't I? And then I did. I thought, see, my sanctuary, the one thing in the book, I think that's where you pretty well work out where I was at 8 years old or whatever. I used to hide in a drain. That was my sanctuary. And I think that, and I wasn't until I worked out that if you're living in a drain because that's your safe place, what, and all of a sudden I had to sit and really make a serious decision. Then do I put in everything? And I did. I went there. I tried to not be too graphic, but what happened to me, I mean, because I was raped from 7 years old. Sometimes once a day, sometimes a few times a day, depends on the mood. But I'd been sexually abused from a toddler. So I thought, well, it's the psychological abuse that went with it because I was always threatened. It talks about coercion, you know, like if you don't do what I do, you'll be put in a baby home. Well, that one used to terrify me. It's the psychological abuse that got me the worst. So, and then you're sort of writing and writing in a third person. Suddenly I'm starting to realize I'm writing about myself. And it took a few lines for it all to come flooding back. It's some of it was cathartic. I can't say it wasn't, but I think the rest of it was sort of like, I remember I think I might have even read it at the end of the book that I was in a marriage for 20 years. He was not violent, but he was emotionally distant. Had no interest. And it just talks about the whole way I was treated. Like when I was attempted suicide, he sold my F100, who I called Effie, because he thought I was going to die. So he brought himself a motorbike. And it was just the most disturbing part was I asked myself at the end of it, why did I allow this to happen? Why did I let people treat me so appallingly my whole life? And it was questioning myself all the way through it. Like I was getting angry at myself. The more I typed, the angrier I was getting.
Back at that person you used to be.
Yeah. Well, even as a child, you just allowed it. You know, you don't realise that. But it took to the end of the book, and I was so disgusted in myself. I thought, what's wrong with you? You're such a strong person. Why have you allowed people to treat you so bad? And I dare say when people finish reading that book, they're going to be asking themselves the same question because you're conditioned. You just go along with it. Especially when you've got kids, you know, like how many people just live together because of finances or the threats of, if you leave, I'll take your kids.
Yeah.
And I had it all. So I stayed in a very, very unhappy marriage because I didn't want to lose my kids, because I was told that they'd bring my past up and I wouldn't. And I fell for it. I fell for everything.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how many women and men have been victims of the same thing? So I was very honest. I just didn't pull any punches. I didn't make myself look like poor me because I allowed it to happen. I could
And
have stopped it at any stage.
yeah.
But when that's the thing about abuse, when you're abused as a child, you don't know anything else. Everything it's your daily life.
Yeah.
I
And
was sexually abused for
the,
so long. It was just part of life.
yeah. It sets the tone of what you're going to accept for so many years until that healing's taken place as well. Survivors, talk about it's just what they expected. It's what they knew.
The one thing that does frustrate me about the system is there's not enough lived experience people working in organisations. They've got 20-odd-year-olds that have read everything in a book, that have got no life experience, having the audacity to tell people our age what we should be doing when they've never lived it. They don't know what it's like. They don't know how soul destroying it is, how hard it is sometimes to even want to wake up. Their biggest crisis is running out of shampoo, and then they've got the audacity to tell someone like us that have been through so many mental warfares, well, my chapter 3 tells me that you should be doing this. No, we need people that have been there and done it and understand and have felt it and have experienced it.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first therapist, as I said, all she wanted to do was talk about her stupid dog.
You still remember that too? Unbelievable.
I mean,
yeah.
the second one, all they wanted to do was listen to what a bitter ex-husband said, instead of actually ringing up my local doctors and saying, do you have a history report on this person? The system is so wrong. They take everyone's word at face value. They don't give you any respect. They talk about you in the third person. You're never there. You could be sitting there and they'll just talk around you. But nobody ever, they tell us, like my page is Speak Up, All Survivors Matter. But we can speak up, but you need people to listen.
Yeah.
You need people to acknowledge you. You need someone to say, well, okay, well, I've heard what you've got to say. And I think everything you've said is valid, and we're going to work together towards a solution. But instead they fob you off to somebody else because they don't have a clue, or they just don't want to. So groups like what you're doing and what I'm doing, we fill the void from the people that have got no clue or inclination, because we've got the money, we've got the ability to fix the system.
Absolutely, we do. Yeah. As in the government do so much more for these issues that involve a huge number of people.
They just need to prioritise, that's all. And we're not a priority. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
We're past investing in. I have people that will speak to me and I'll say, because the one thing I do automatically is, if depending on the issue, I'll give them a range of networks and I'll send them the link or the phone number, and I'll say, right, you need to speak to these people. I don't want to. I'd rather speak to you. I said, but I'm not an expert. You need to speak to somebody that's, better trained, blah, blah, blah. Even though I do have lots of training over the years, I've done so many different courses. But I always make sure that I direct people to the relevant sources. But they've been so let down, most of them don't even acknowledge, they won't even accept it. But never stops me from giving it to them, because they need to have that. But that in itself speaks volumes, the fact that they don't even want to ring them.
Yeah.
And these are places that are first place that you should be contacting, and even those places have let them down. I'm talking about major mental health organisations.
And that's
as soon as I send them,
cool, isn't it? When people are calling a mental health organisation, it's so important that call is taken seriously and they're given information and skills that they can work with. Like, it could be a last cry for help.
Well, it is. And I think I try to make sure that people don't rely solely on what I say, because I am not an authority. I've never claimed to be. I just talk about what's happened with me and what's worked for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got to make sure that they've got a network to fall back on. So I just flood them with multitude.
Connection.
All right,
Yeah. And it's good, I guess it's good for survivors to be seeing that there are different avenues that they can take. There's people doing this and people doing that as well, rather than, at least they're not feeling alone.
well, the thing is, the biggest problem with survivors is trust.
Mm.
And I said this when I spoke at the Justice Inquiries the other day. The problem is with the public system is it takes a lot for us to trust. So you finally find someone that you can speak to, that you're pouring your heart to. You've started to build up a rapport. All of a sudden, funding stopped. They've been kicked out, and now someone's taken their place, and you've got to start all over again.
Yeah.
And this is what lets the system down. There's no follow-up. There's no one to actually stay there and support that person. They're just usually interns that are just using that as a bridge to get to somewhere else. And they need someone that's going to be there for them for at least a year. Not just,
yeah.
But that's what we don't have. We have places that rely solely on funding, and these people are under an enormous amount of strain.
Mm.
They've got to see, 10,000 people and they're one person. So obviously you're not getting the help that you need. So they get sick of it. They get sick of waiting. That is why there's so many suicides. Well, people are so reliant on alcohol and pills and drugs, because in my case, I mean, I read it in my book, it's probably not the best thing to be telling people, but at that stage, I could rely on my alcohol.
Yeah.
I relied it. It was always there for my support.
Comfort.
It always made me feel better.
Yeah.
It was an instant fix. I could just numb. If anything tried to start creeping through, that was it. It was gone. But there comes a point where you've got to stop relying on that and think, well, I've got to start addressing things. But usually you've got to hit rock bottom to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, because you run support for domestic abuse survivors, for survivors of different sorts of child abuse with mental health, what would you say to someone that's listening that's maybe struggling with their mental health at the moment as a great option?
There's so many people out there that you can talk to. Nobody's alone. That's the beauty about today. We've got social media, we've got every type of interaction, and you can do it anonymously. That is the beauty of most of these places now. They've got exit buttons that you can just click off, and there's no record on your computer that you've been speaking to any of these organisations. That makes you feel good. But don't suffer alone. There's too many people out there that are willing to listen. You've just got to reach out, and it's that first initial, what the problem is with domestic violence, and that is, and especially I know this with women, nobody wants to feel like a failure.
Mm.
And the moment those words come out of that mouth, you can't take them back. And then all of a sudden they feel like they've failed as a wife, they've failed as a mother. And that's why a lot of people keep it, and I was one of them. That's why a lot of people keep it to themselves, because once that first acknowledgement is the worst, and once it's out, as I said about Pandora's box, you can't put it back. Yeah. So a lot of people will just suffer alone.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of anonymous places, as I said. They don't need to go on record until they build the confidence up. At least reach out and speak to someone, even if it's only a friend, but don't try to struggle through alone, because that's worse. Yeah. Because you build up scenarios in your head, and you try to fix something that can't be fixed. And once you get to that point that you're trying to fix something, and I posted something the other day, and it says, when you start Googling domestic violence, then you know that you've got problems. I mean, If you're starting to look for the signs, then you must know in your heart something's wrong.
Yeah. And even like you were saying about the voluntary placement, you've said people that have reached out to you and they didn't realize that they'd been voluntary placed, but they were like, oh, what this person's talking about sounds really familiar.
And it comes back to what everyone in the world's doing now. It comes down to awareness.
Awareness, exactly.
Raising awareness.
Yeah.
And I'm raising awareness for the people that were voluntary placed, that were invisible, that don't fit in anywhere in the world. They feel like they don't, but you do. I mean, but I raise awareness for sexual abuse. I raise awareness for incest. I raise awareness for domestic abuse. I raise awareness for men being domestically abused, because believe it or not, men do hurt too. And people forget that. So I don't believe in gender. I believe across the board. So I also run an LGBTQIA group for intimate violence, for anything. So I literally cover the board. So when people contact me, because I have been in it for so long, I've got so many contacts, I can literally just go, right,
it's awesome.
This is what you LGB, right? I've got a gay intimate violence group there. Bang, send it to them.
Yeah.
Sexual abuse, I know straight away, depending on the age group, and if it's something that's current, obviously the first point of call, they should call the police instantly. So it's about awareness and letting people know that they're not alone, and that they can trust. And that's the hardest thing. They've got to learn to trust.
Yeah.
But when you've been let down for so long, that's a big call. It is really hard for people to, well, I couldn't trust. I do not believe in the justice system. There is no justice. There is justice for the very, very select. I believe that when it comes to sexual abuse court cases, then it should be a separate courtroom. They should be specialised. The magistrate needs to be retrained in sexual abuse, especially historical sexual abuse, because it's so specialised. I believe the jury should be educated in historical. They shouldn't be your average Joe. They should be people that have specialised in psychiatry or sexual abuse of some nature, whether it's at least, because the thing is, people forget that people on juries are human beings. And if they sit there on the get triggered, they're listening to someone on the stand, and all of a sudden somebody starts talking about something. You've got someone in the jury that goes, oh my God, I went through the same thing. And all of a sudden they're sitting there triggered.
Yeah.
There's not enough training. There should be specialised groups for specialised things. And at the moment, you're just thrown in a melting pot. And especially with the court system, like most magistrates, they're overworked. They have so many cases a day. And by the time it gets to a complicated a complicated case like yours, well, they just want it over and done with. Just go. And I've heard that story over and over and over again. It's terrible. So raising awareness, retraining, I think, is what we really need. I mean, I see that, like yours with child trafficking and satanic ritual child abuse. I've actually got a few people on my page that would go through that, and they're dismissed.
Yeah. It's all shut down.
Absolutely. Yep. It didn't happen, doesn't happen, never happened.
Yeah.
And until people start acknowledging, yes, horrible things in this world do happen. I don't like it, but we have to accept it. It does happen.
Yeah.
But this putting their heads in the sand is not going to make the situation go away. So we need people to be more active, more opinionated. We need loud voices. We need people to say, right, I've heard you speak. I'm now going to speak for you.
That's
not
awesome.
just pencil it, okay then, and then just put it in the too hard basket.
Yeah, so true. We need people speaking up and taking action more than ever. at the moment. Things really need to start changing.
Yeah, but what can you see is going to change in your lifetime? Can you see change?
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like there's more people awake than ever. So I feel that they're now waking up other people, and slowly the general population, things are starting to change around them.
Well, do you know who I find the biggest critics of mentioning rape are? Women.
Yeah. Oh, it's shocking. Even with the child sexual abuse, like we've had some unfortunately really nasty women just
Yes.
completely being unable to park it anywhere and just lash out. And I just find it so shocking and so surprising, because I'm like, I don't know, is there not a maternal instinct? And I know some of these people are mothers as well, but it's just like you were saying, people's heads are in the sand, and it's time for them to look around.
The amount of women that I've had say to me, and I've read in regards to rape, well, maybe if they didn't dress like sluts, they wouldn't have been asking for it. Well, I bet you they were drunk. And I just sit there and I think, my God, you're a woman. You're a woman justifying a man raping a woman because of what you...
So shocking. Or even with children. It's so shocking. Yeah.
It's like there's a justification for everything. Oh, well, obviously she was a promiscuous child. Like, there's another post going around. If Uncle Randy, instead of telling your daughter not to wear his shorts when Uncle Randy comes around, why don't you tell Uncle Randy not to come around?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, people they'll just dance around the subject.
Yeah.
We need to address things as it is.
Yeah.
And especially incest, that needs to be addressed, because as long as that's kept in the dark and no one wants to talk about it, it's going to continually keep happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Tracie. You're such an amazing advocate for having a voice for so many groups that don't have one. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. And could you let us know how would people get in touch to order a book if they'd like to?
Well, if they look for my page, Speak Up, All Survivors Matter.
Yeah, I can tag.
Speak Up
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Speak Up with a dash and then All Survivors Matter. You can message me and I'll send you the link. And I think, don't expect, as I said, a Pulitzer Prize. It's just something that I've written. It's probably got a better billion mistakes, but they're my mistakes. So, and if a publisher ever picks it up and wants to do better, well, I'm happy with that. So, but it's going to,
yeah.
It's just there to show people you're not alone. Other people have gone through just as shitty as what you're going through. Hence the fact, my shitty life.
Yeah, my shitty life. You'll get through it and you're not alone.
You will.
I love that.
And that's what people need to realise. It probably won't be today or tomorrow, but you do get through it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Tracie.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a great day.